My name is Sarah, and I've been working in corporate America for 15 years. I've seen every type of office villain you can imagine, but Marcus Thompson takes the cake. He became our new sales director 6 months ago, and from day one, he's made it his personal mission to remind everyone that he went to Harvard Business School. What Marcus doesn't know is that I have a photographic memory and a very particular set of skills when it comes to corporate policy. The first red flag should have been when Marcus called an all-hands meeting on his second day. He stood at the front of our conference room, adjusting his overly expensive tie, and announced that things were going to change around here. He said our department had been too relaxed, too friendly, and that friendship doesn't pay the bills. I watched as my colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Marcus had that look in his eyes, the one that screams, "I'm about to make your life miserable and enjoy every second of it." Over the next few weeks, Marcus began his reign of terror. He implemented a new policy where every email had to be carbon copied to him. Every single one. He started timing our lunch breaks with a stopwatch app on his phone. If you were even 2 minutes late coming back, he'd write you up for time theft. When Jenny from accounting asked if she could leave 30 minutes early for her daughter's school play, Marcus told her that parenthood was a choice, not an excuse, and that dedicated employees don't let personal matters interfere with business objectives. I started keeping detailed notes in an encrypted folder on my personal laptop. Every conversation, every unreasonable demand, every time Marcus violated company policy while enforcing his own made-up rules. You see, Marcus had no idea that I used to work in HR before transferring to operations. I knew the employee handbook better than most HR representatives. The situation escalated when Marcus decided that our quarterly sales targets weren't ambitious enough. He called another meeting and announced that anyone who didn't meet the new targets would be placed on a performance improvement plan. The new targets were literally impossible, requiring us to increase sales by 300% in a market that had been declining for 2 years. When Tom, our most experienced salesperson, tried to explain this, Marcus cut him off and said that winners don't make excuses, they make sales. 2 weeks later, Marcus fired Tom. He claimed it was due to poor performance, but everyone knew it was retaliation for speaking up in the meeting. Tom had been with the company for 8 years and had consistently exceeded his targets until Marcus arrived. The termination paperwork cited insubordination and failure to meet clearly defined objectives. I helped Tom clean out his desk, and as we were packing his family photos, he whispered that he was going to file a wrongful termination lawsuit. That's when I knew Marcus had made his first critical mistake. The company has a strict policy about documenting performance issues over a 90-day period before termination. Marcus had fired Tom after just 14 days under his new impossible targets. I quietly reached out to my former colleague in HR, Lisa, who confirmed that Marcus had never filed the proper preliminary paperwork. But Marcus wasn't done. He started playing favorites with the younger female employees, offering them special projects and praising their work while criticizing identical efforts from older team members. He began scheduling mandatory overtime on weekends, claiming it was necessary for team building. When people complained, he'd say that maybe they weren't the right cultural fit for a high-performance environment. The breaking point came when Marcus accused me of industrial espionage. During a team meeting, he claimed that I had been sharing confidential client information with competitors. He had absolutely no evidence, but he announced that I was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The room went dead silent. Everyone knew Marcus was lying, but no one dared to speak up. As I gathered my things, Marcus smirked and said that sometimes dead weight needs to be cut loose for the team to soar. What Marcus didn't know was that I had been documenting everything, and I mean everything. Every discriminatory comment, every policy violation, every instance of retaliation. I had also been quietly networking with people throughout the company. You see, my ex-husband works in the legal department, and we maintained a professional relationship after our divorce. My college roommate is now the vice president of human resources at our parent company. And my neighbor happens to be married to the CEO. During my administrative leave, I reached out to my network. I started with my ex-husband, David, who works in corporate legal. I shared my documentation with him, and his jaw dropped. He told me that Marcus had created a textbook case of hostile work environment, wrongful termination, and discriminatory practices. David said that any employment lawyer would take this case on contingency and that the company would likely settle out of court to avoid publicity. Next, I called my college roommate, Patricia, who now works in HR at the parent company. She was horrified when I showed her my evidence. She told me that they had been receiving anonymous complaints about Marcus for weeks, but without concrete documentation, their hands were tied. My detailed logs and recorded conversations were exactly what they needed to launch a formal investigation. But I wasn't done yet. You see, I had learned something very interesting about Marcus during my research. His Harvard MBA story was true, but what he never mentioned was that he had been asked to leave his previous company due to similar issues. A little digging revealed that he had been quietly forced out of 3 different positions in the past 5 years. The pattern was always the same: create a hostile work environment, get people fired, and then move on before the lawsuits hit. The plan I hatched was beautiful in its simplicity. Marcus had scheduled a major presentation for the board of directors, where he was going to showcase his department's improved performance under his leadership. He had been bragging about it for weeks, claiming that his tough love approach had transformed our lazy team into a lean, mean, selling machine. What he didn't know was that I had been invited to that meeting. You see, Patricia had arranged for me to attend as a special consultant on employee relations. The board had been concerned about the recent turnover in our department and wanted an inside perspective. Marcus had no idea I would be there because the invitation came through the parent company's HR department, not through local management. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early and set up my materials. I had prepared a comprehensive report on Marcus's management practices, complete with documented evidence, witness statements, and a detailed analysis of how his actions had violated numerous company policies and potentially exposed the company to significant legal liability. Marcus walked into the boardroom 15 minutes late, as usual, carrying his laptop and wearing his most expensive suit. He froze when he saw me sitting at the conference table, but quickly recovered and gave me his usual condescending smile. He probably thought I was there to be fired publicly, which would have been exactly his style. The board members filed in, including the CEO, CFO, and several department heads. Marcus began his presentation with his usual confidence, talking about how he had transformed our department's culture and improved accountability. He showed charts and graphs that painted a picture of increased productivity and efficiency. What he failed to mention was that most of those improvements had come from overworking the remaining staff after he had fired half the team. When Marcus finished his presentation, the CEO thanked him and then turned to me. She said that they had asked me to provide some additional context on the operational changes in our department. Marcus's face went white, but he maintained his composure, probably thinking I would just corroborate his story out of fear. I stood up and connected my laptop to the projector. My presentation was titled Employee Relations Assessment, Department Sales Division. I began by thanking the board for the opportunity to provide an honest assessment of the recent changes in our department. Then I started sharing the data. I showed them the timeline of employee terminations under Marcus's leadership. 7 people in 6 months, compared to 2 people in the previous 3 years. I presented the documentation of policy violations, including failure to follow proper termination procedures, discriminatory treatment based on age and gender, and retaliation against employees who raised legitimate concerns. Marcus tried to interrupt me twice, claiming that I was a disgruntled employee with an agenda, but the CEO asked him to let me finish. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead as I continued through my presentation. The most damaging evidence came when I played the audio recordings. I had been using a voice memo app to document our conversations, which is perfectly legal in our state as long as one party consents to the recording. The board listened in stunned silence as Marcus's voice filled the room, making discriminatory comments, threatening employees, and bragging about how he could fire anyone he wanted without consequences. One recording was particularly devastating. It was from the day he accused me of industrial espionage. Marcus's voice was crystal clear as he told his assistant that he needed to get rid of me because I knew too much about his previous companies and might start asking uncomfortable questions. He literally said that sometimes you have to eliminate threats before they become problems. The room was dead silent when the recording ended. I looked around the table and saw expressions ranging from shock to disgust to barely contained anger. The CEO's face was stone, but I could see the fury in her eyes. The CFO was frantically taking notes. The head of HR was shaking her head in disbelief. I concluded my presentation by outlining the legal exposure that Marcus's actions had created for the company. Wrongful termination lawsuits, hostile work environment claims, age discrimination charges, and potential whistleblower retaliation cases. I estimated that the company was looking at potentially millions of dollars in legal fees and settlements if these cases went to court. Then I played my final card. I presented a detailed analysis of the actual department performance under Marcus's leadership. While he had claimed improved productivity, the reality was that revenue per employee had actually decreased by 15%. Customer satisfaction scores had plummeted. And the cost of constantly recruiting and training new employees had eaten up any supposed savings from his efficiency measures. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, his face cycling through various shades of red and white. He finally tried to defend himself, claiming that I had fabricated evidence and that this was all an elaborate revenge plot by a bitter employee. But his voice was shaking, and everyone in the room could see through his desperate lies. The CEO thanked me for my thorough presentation and asked Marcus if he had anything to add. He stammered something about how great leaders sometimes have to make tough decisions and that you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. The metaphor fell flat in the corporate boardroom, and I could see several board members exchanging glances. Then the CEO delivered the final blow. She said that based on the evidence presented, Marcus would be placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation by both HR and the legal department. His access to company systems would be suspended, and he would need to surrender his company laptop and phone immediately. As security escorted Marcus from the building, he turned back to look at me through the conference room window. The expression on his face was pure shock and horror as he realized that his reign of terror was over. I simply smiled and closed my laptop, knowing that sometimes the best revenge is just letting someone destroy themselves with their own actions. Marcus's final mistake wasn't underestimating me, it was underestimating the power of documentation and the importance of treating people with basic human dignity. As I watched him being walked to his car by security, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, our department could finally get back to the business of actually serving our customers instead of serving one man's ego. The investigation that followed confirmed everything in my presentation and more. Marcus was terminated for cause, which meant no severance package and no positive reference. Several of his victims, including Tom, filed successful lawsuits against both Marcus and the company. And I was promoted to interim sales director while they searched for a replacement. The best part? 3 months later, I heard through my network that Marcus had been hired by one of our competitors. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost.